Hello everyone, this is Mihai and Simona at the Circle of Truth Summit. Today we have a very special guest. Anthony Gitch is joining us. Anthony, welcome to the summit.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for joining us, Anthony. You'll love to hear Anthony because he spent more than 25 years learning how we think and how our beliefs create our own reality. Anthony is an anti-anxiety specialist, a board-certified hypnotherapist. He is the author of the Art of Self-Destruction book.
Freeing yourself from anger and codependency, something that is just unfortunately insidious all over the world.
Yes. So, Anthony, my first question is, what is self-love and if it's important for us?
That's a really deep question, right? I mean, it depends on your background. It depends on how you were raised. All of that stuff really helps determine what you consider to be self-love. For me, self-love is extremely empowering. It gives you the ability to be self-confident. It gives you the ability to trust in your intuition and to love yourself. I mean, that's obviously right there, but to really appreciate the gifts that you have to share with the world, to stand in your light and allow that to shine out and bring people towards you. That would be the best definition I could come up with anyway, off the cuff. It brings in all of those things. It brings in the ability to forgive. It brings in the ability to accept and share and learn.
How can we stop the sabotage ourselves and to start living from a place of peace and harmony?
I think that the best way to do that is to do a lot of introspection, to recognize and to take acceptance or to take responsibility rather for where you are in your life, what you want in your life. And, you know, here's the tricky thing. People oftentimes think the word surrender is the very first thing I come up to. And a lot of people think that surrender is a white flag, right? That I'm going to be a stepping stone for somebody or a doormat. And it's actually the exact opposite. Surrender is the ability to accept what is happening in life around you, to take that information in, and then to be able to calibrate what it is you're experiencing. So the way I explain it to my clients is I think about a surfer on a surfboard. When the surfer is riding the wave, he doesn't try to control the water that is underneath his board. He feels what is happening and he calibrates his weight accordingly. That way he gets the very best ride from each wave, regardless of the size of it, right? And when we can do that with our own lives, with taking responsibility, not blaming, not whining, not complaining, but just going, this is the situation right now. What is it that I need to do to turn it into the situation that is best going to benefit me?
How people can overcome that have been in this situation of sabotage, of codependency.
The best thing is, again, take responsibility for your life. If you are in an area, I think one of the very best things that I can recommend for anybody who's experiencing a lot of codependency in their world is, number one, a book called Women Who Love Too Much by Robin Norwood. It's an amazing book. Number two, look up Codependence Anonymous. It's a worldwide organization that helps people get through. It's a 12-step program. I think it's marvelous. But again, the most important thing is taking responsibility for yourself, for where you're at. You know, it doesn't mean beating yourself up. You've got to forgive yourself for the mistakes you've made in your life. We've all made them. I've made a ton of them. I talk about it in my book, The Art of Self-Destruction. I mean, I got myself kicked out of the military in order to be with a partner who didn't want to be with me. That was my first real in-depth jump into the codependent lifestyle, right? And that's when I was just 17 years old. And from there, it just got deeper and darker to where I'd ended up in physically abusive relationships, verbally abusive relationships, and thinking all of the while that this was my responsibility, that this was my fault that this was happening to me. And in a sense, it was, because I kept the finger pointed outwards of, well, it's their fault that this is happening, because if they hadn't have done this, then I wouldn't have had to do this, and then that wouldn't have happened, right? And so there was always the ability to finger point. When we stop pointing the finger out and point the finger back at ourselves, that is how we stop sabotaging. We start to become conscious of the movements that we're making through our life, and we start to decide that is an old behavior, the way I used to do things, I need to do something different now. And that's where coaches come in, that's where hypnosis professionals come in, counselors, any kind of program that best fits the lifestyle of the individual, right? Because not every single thing is good for every single person. We're all very, very different. But we have to learn that our minds do not produce truth. Our minds are simply information gathering tools, and then it's up to our awareness mixed with consciousness, mixed with heart, that creates intelligence, right? And so we have to take all of those things that are coming in and look at it as the observer, right? As that ultimate observer, like it says in The Secret of all the things, you know, a really old movie called The Secret, which I'm sure a lot of people have seen. So many people think that it's still about magic. It's still about, you know, oh, the luck of the draw, and I just got to think positive. And that's a part of it. But that positive thinking is what that does, is that starts to retrain your brain. It starts to get your reticular activating system to actually look for and recognize the things that are working and that will work for you, rather than recognizing and bringing and attracting the things that aren't working. Because like they say, what we think about, we bring about, right? And when you start to ask yourself empowering questions like, how am I going to, for me, every time I have a client, how am I going to best serve my clients today? How will I best serve my clients today, right? When I start to ask that question, I don't write down the answers. I allow my subconscious mind, my imagination, that powerful part of us, to start to go through all of these things that I will do it this way, I'll do it this way, I'll do it by being present, I will do it by making a sacred space for them to feel safe and honored in. These are all of the things that I will do, right? And by doing so, it empowers my subconscious mind to recognize solutions to things that haven't even happened yet, right? And so that is one of the most powerful things that you can do, is to create empowering questions for yourself. And the two best ones is, how am I going to, well, whatever today, whatever that may be, just tack it on to that. And then the next one is, how will I today? You know, how will I blah, blah, blah today? Because is what it does. It doesn't say how can I, because can and try and hope are all, you know, twin sister words to failure, right? They suggest the idea that, well, I don't know, how can I do that? How can I? Well, I don't know, I can't, right? In the past, I've known that I can't. So when you say can, your mind oftentimes will put up all sorts of barricades and blockades, obstacles, objections that says, well, no, I've got proof that I can't. But when you say, how will I? Now that's opened up a different part of your mind. It's creating new neural connections that says that these are the possibilities that I am able to create, because the world is full of possibilities, right? We only need to look for them.
So you're talking about responsibilities. How can we become responsible?
We can become responsible by a lot of introspection, looking at our day, right? Begin by writing down what your day's been like and how you were through the day, and then say, how would it have been better? Most of the time when someone runs into a challenge, they will first identify the things outside of themselves that created the problem. I have learned to, when I have a problem, the very first thing I do is, what was my part in it? What was my part? Because as soon as I can identify what my part was, now I can be empowered and responsible to make changes that needed to be made. Whether that's going out and apologizing to somebody for a inappropriate action, or, I mean, I can give you an example. I mean, I was just in the UK a few weeks ago, and we were all at a big dinner, and I snapped. I was hangry, I hadn't gotten my food and we'd been working all day. And I got a little bit snappy. I was the angry American towards one of the waitresses because no one gives anybody water over there when they sit down, right? And so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, where's my water? Where's my water? I need something to drink. And finally, the little gal, after me saying something, she starts to bring some water and she starts to put it at the other end of the table from where I was. And all of the people down there had their drinks with them already. And I was like, wait a minute, get your butt down here and give me some, and I was kind of hard on the young lady. And at the end of the dinner, I took responsibility for that. I didn't make it okay. She tried to make it okay when I apologized to her in front of everybody. I didn't take it to the side. I was inappropriate in front of everybody. I need to apologize and take responsibility in front of everybody. And I apologized to her for the behavior. And she said to me, oh, that's okay. I said, no, it is not okay that I did that to you. And it's never okay for other people to do that to you. Now, in that moment, you could see a shift in her eyes, right? From being somebody who had been kind of walked on to all of a sudden, wow, I'm worth. I gave her back something that I inadvertently took, right? And that wasn't okay. And so that's what being responsible is about. Being responsible means even in the good times, the bad times, when you're a jerk like I was that day, whatever it was, accepting that and going, you know what, I'm a human being, I'm going to make mistakes, but I also am willing to clean it up and to take responsibility for my actions and do what is appropriate to kind of fix it if I can, right? That's what it means to me.
Yes, and from this story, I can understand that waitress didn't have boundaries.
Well, didn't
Otherwise, she would have said something.
Well, but in the where we were, it was a high-end place. She was young. Even when I was a waiter, if someone would have treated me that way, I'd have been all up in their face, right back to them. But let's be real here. This is a young girl, right, who's being spoken to by an older gentleman. And there's already an unequal power dynamic, right? I'm the customer, I'm always right, she is the waiter. There's a dynamic there, a subconscious dynamic, an energetic dynamic. And I'll tell you what, when I get loud and I get pissy, most people won't stand up for themselves because it's the energy that I produce is powerful. Being able to give that back to her was I needed to be able to do that. And I think she probably has boundaries, but she didn't know how to use them, right? She didn't know that it was going to be appropriate for her to look at me and go, well, you know what, dude, screw you. Because who knows if I would have gone to her boss, who knows then if I would have escalated the situation. I'm not going to put any of that off on her. None of it was her responsibility at all.
Yes, what I was wanting to say is that our parents don't teach us how to set boundaries from the childhood.
Yes, correct. Because they didn't learn from their parents. And especially, men have to be ultra aware that with women in particular, and especially from countries that aren't like America, and even here in this country, women are still taught to be subjugated. They're taught to be less than. They're taught to keep their mouths shut. They're taught to not talk back. They're taught, that's not appropriate for a lady to do that and that sort of thing. And so it is my responsibility, particularly as a man, to make sure that I am uplifting those females in the world that are sometimes not able to do that for themselves and demonstrate that they do have the power to do that, because all of us are worth the exact same thing as a human being. And there is no difference between you and me and anybody else that I work with. And that's why I tell people, when you put somebody on a pedestal, you're also the one who's going to knock them off that pedestal, because they didn't put themselves there. You did, and no one can live up to those kinds of expectations.
Yes.
Especially when they're unaware of them.
Yes, that's wonderful, Anthony.
Anthony, so what people can practice like starting from today to achieve unconditional self-love or unleash their authenticity? What can be as a daily routine that they can apply starting from today, for example?
Starting from today, empowering questions. Literally write on your mirror or someplace where you are every day the term, how am I going to, whatever it is that you want to put in there today. And by doing so, you're going to start to retrain your brain. You're going to start to retrain the reticular activating system to recognize the powers that you do have. And then, that other empowering question, how will I, whatever it is today? Those are things that you can implement right now. And, the important thing is not to write down the answers, only write down the question. And then let the subconscious mind go wild. Right? Because that is how we learn. Another thing that I think is really important for people to understand when it comes to self-love, love the dark part of yourself. Don't be afraid of the dark part, because when you don't look at it, when you don't accept it, when you don't explore it, when you don't do those things with that part of yourself you don't like, that's only going to grow stronger, and it's going to create problems for people. And I'll give you an example. I've written a book on anger and codependency and that kind of stuff. But on the flip side, I'm working on another book about a gay serial killer, right? It's dark. It's extremely dark. And one of my friends, who's like, oh boy, I just don't know if I like you very much after reading some of this, right? And it's like, well, because I'm willing to look at that side. Is Stephen King going to go out and start a pet cemetery? Are these things really going to happen? No. But because I'm willing to explore that side and have fun with it, now some people are going, ooh, wait, we didn't know there was that dark side. Well, of course there is. We've all got it. Just because somebody doesn't want to admit to it, those are the people who scare me, because they're the ones who are going to end up doing some crazy things because they didn't think that they would ever be able to do that, right? And they're the ones who get pushed over the edge and then finally act on their dark desires or their dark impulses. When instead, if you just look at them for what they are, being human, we can accept all parts of ourselves. Self-love has to be every single aspect of who we are, right? The good, the bad, the ugly, because I am a wonderful, wonderful human being. I am flawed, and I love myself for it, because that's how I learn and that's how I grow.
Yeah, so at a practical level, how can we embrace our dark side?
Explore it. Don't be afraid of it. Write about it. Talk about it, right? Have conversations with those who are close to you and say, you know what? I do have some of these darker feelings and they're really bothering me right now. And so can we discuss this? Can I share with you what I'm feeling? But, you got to be safe and comfortable with people. I don't have to be safe and comfortable with people because I really don't care what I care what people think. I know me. I'm very confident in the human being that I am and in all of my flaws. And so I know that those darker things, who cares? I mean, I write about it. Doesn't mean I'm going to go out and pull someone's fingernails out, for goodness sakes. You know what I mean? But I accept that those are thoughts that I have sometimes. It's we all have those things, and that is a part of who we are as humans. And if we're not willing to look at that, how can we have full 100% self-love if we're cutting a part of ourselves out and not acknowledging it? It's like not acknowledging the fact that somebody may be an alcoholic. That doesn't make them not an alcoholic.
It's right? About dealing with accepting it.
Yes.
And
acceptance is always the key to. Yes. Yep. Yep, exactly. Because acceptance is always, even with hypnosis and the work that I do, it's, I used to work in a process where we had to regress people back to what we call the initial sensitizing event. And unless we did that, then they weren't going to be able to get any better. And it was inevitable because we would trigger abreaction, which is a reliving kind of the trauma. And I did this for many years. And then I recognized that at the end of the process, really the only thing that created the change was the acceptance of the trauma. It didn't change the trauma. All it did was go through and we were able to, the person was able to accept it. So now the way I work is I just get right to the acceptance piece. Why go through all of that again? It's like I tell people, we have the option each and every day. Here's a great thing to do. Stop painting tomorrow's page with yesterday's news, because then you've got very little space to create what could be, right? Then you have limited room to paint a new picture when you've splattered the canvas with yesterday's black ink, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
So you talked about hypnosis.
Mhm.
How does hypnosis help us to grow our self-esteem, our self-confidence, and to accept ourselves?
When we're talking about self-hypnosis, which all hypnosis is self-hypnosis, it gives you the ability to focus on the things that are positive and working, right? We're able to create what it is that we want. There's very little difference for a lot of people between meditation and hypnosis, right? I'm going to explain to you what I believe the difference is and how you can utilize those things and marry those things together. In a lot of meditation sort of stuff, the idea is that you recognize the thought as it comes in and then you let it float down the river. You don't follow it, right? With hypnosis, you recognize the thought that is coming in and you explore it and you build on it. You follow it to its end and you help to create the direction it's going, right? That's my kind of difference between the two. And you marry them by going into a meditative state, which is what we do when we go into hypnosis anyway, right? We're in a very introspective state. But rather than disregarding the thoughts that are coming in, we explore them and we have fun with them. And we say to ourselves, okay, this is the thought. How do I grow that? How do I continue to grow that, right? And for me, it's like I have the ability when I'm in hypnosis, when I do self-hypnosis, I think about the things that I want, right? I think about whether it's even as silly as in the amount of money I want in my bank account. You know, I visualize that and I say, I have the ability to create this, right? It is within me to create it. Not even within me, it's up to me to have the thoughts. It's up to the universe on how it's going to happen, right? If I start to try to figure out, well, how am I going to do that? That's not going to work. It's not for me to figure out the how. It's for me to create the possibilities and allow the universe to fill in the how, right? And again, you do this by attracting positive things in your life by positive thoughts and positive affirmations. Because again, that's retraining the reticular activating system to recognize that which is working rather than that which is not working.
Yes, and we need to have faith and to feel it inside that we are receiving, that it's
Yes.
coming.
And that you're well, I'm not even going to say deserving of it. I don't like the word deserve because no one deserves anything in life. What I like to think is I am, and I'm certainly not entitled to it, but I am willing and open to accepting whatever is out there. And because I want these things, those are the things that I focus on and I open the doors to. So again, even something as simple as a car. How am I going to do the best job I can do today in order to achieve the ability to buy that $700,000 car that someone might want? I mean, I don't want that kind of a car, but someone I'm sure does. You need to open up to the possibilities of it. If you're too worried about the barriers, the obstacles, the objections, you're not going to attain it because that's what's going to show up for you around every single corner.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And we know that you have a special gift for the audience. Can you expand on that?
Yes, so I will be providing a PDF called Emotional Mastery. It's from a workshop I teach, and it's basically, it goes over, it's funny, people who have children, right? They'll get into a car. That child can get into any car or any kind of electronic device these days, and they can tell you what all the buttons are in the car at 10 years old, right? But you ask them, what is inadequacy? I don't know. What is anger for? I don't know. They don't understand their emotions, yet they can tell you about how their computer game works. How sad is that? And so emotional mastery covers the basic emotions. It covers what boredom is telling us, what guilt is telling us, what all of these things, what their actual meaning is, right? Because if we have an understanding of the meaning, now we have the tools to deal with it, right? And so it's going to talk about that. It's going to talk about what I call the 1, 2, 3s of being able to deal with each of these emotions. For example, with anger, what is anger really for? Is it for retribution? No, absolutely not. It's to motivate you to make something right. Now, if you can't make it right, then the only other thing you can do is forgive and move on, right? Otherwise, you're carrying around resentment and you're only punishing yourself, because whoever it is has already moved on. They've forgotten that they've upset you, and you're sitting there, and you know, that only brings you into a further down pit. When instead, if we recognize what anger is for, to motivate us to make something right, well, gosh, I don't have the power to make it right. Only they could do that. All right, well then my option is I need to forgive them so that I am free from whatever that was. And so it's like with boredom. I love boredom. I'm bored. Well, what does that tell you? It just means I'm bored. I have nothing to do. No, it means that you're not challenging your mind, right? If you're antsy, if you're sitting there and you're shaking, you know, I'm so bored. Well, why don't you get up and walk around the block? That's what emotional mastery is about understanding the basic, the core emotions and knowing what to do with them.
I think it's really profound.
It's based off the book I read a long time ago, and I turned it into kind of my own little workshop.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Anthony, and thank you for sharing with us all your experience and all your human part. Because even after 25 years, you still got angry, and I think your genuine and your honesty will make people move, and they will find that we are still human, even though we get to a point where we know so much and we practice so much, we still are humans.
It's those things, it's that humility, it's that recognition that makes us more powerful, right? Because I can assure you, the people who first saw that explosion or that little moment that I had, they were like, oh, wow. But they're not going to remember that. They're going to remember the fact that I took responsibility for it and that I was humble enough to make sure that she understood it wasn't about her. This was about me. And that's what they're going to remember. And to me, that's empowering. That's special. And I'm glad that I could share that gift. I'd much rather share it in a positive way, but sometimes we learn by falling, you know. We just got to learn to bounce.
Yes, and I'm sure that girl will remember that she should set boundaries and not to let other people to treat her with anger.
Exactly, because there's always a better way, right? I mean, but again, we're going to be human.
I think it was a lesson for both of you.
Yes, absolutely. Everything I do is a lesson, especially my mistakes. I learn more when I make a jerk of myself than when I am just going, oh, happy, everything is good, everybody loves me. I don't learn a lot like that. I learn when I hit a wall. That's when I go, oh, maybe I should have ducked there, you know? Awareness, you know, creating that yeah, I like being human. I like who I am, and I've got a lot of things to offer. Sometimes anger is a part of that, right? It's going to get the better of me because I'm not perfect.
Yes, and combined with compassion, I think is the perfect formula, because
yes,
we need to forgive ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, without that, who are we, right?
Yes. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I hope that somebody gets a nice little nugget from it.
100%.
So good.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you everyone for watching, and we will see you on the next episode.